All right. So, again, you're going to use the stuff that you learned. However, now we're going to really focus on how we use it to understand how our body works, and we're going to start with DNA and some molecules. Molecules, as you know now, are very tiny. They're made of one, two, sometimes large, a number of atoms. So the smallest molecule would be 2 atoms. So that would be like something like oxygen. And one of the larger molecules, if not one of the largest, is something like DNA. Proteins can also be very large. For instance, your hair is made of protein. You can imagine, you think your hair is long, but imagine how long it would be if you were a molecule. You know, you think it's a long way to walk a mile, but can you imagine how long it would be if you were an ant? A mile would be incredibly far, right? Does that make sense? So if you're a molecule, the length of your hair is an amazing feat, an amazing event. The fact that you're making this protein over and over again, but we'll talk about that later. Now let's talk about DNA. And how do we know what molecules are? How do we even know since we can't see them? And we knew this back in the 30s and 40s, 1930 and 1940. So even older than me, if you can believe it. So we use this stuff called X-ray technology. And they isolated the nucleus of a fruit fly. Now, why fruit flies? So fruit flies. Do you know what fruit flies are? They're those little annoying things that there's several of them there's several insect types, but fruit flies are tiny little flies. They live a very short period of time. They come, if you ever buy fruit from the store, they'll come with their eggs already fertilized, and about a day after you bring the fruit home, your house is like, there's little fruit flies flying around everywhere. You ever notice that? Those fruit flies are very interesting. Their DNA is very interesting. Why did we choose to study molecules in an organism like fruit flies? Can somebody give me an idea? Why choose fruit flies? They're not very similar to us, are they? So why would we choose fruit flies? Fruit flies are different. They're very different from us. They're insects. They don't have a spine. They don't have a skeleton. They don't have an internal circulatory system. They don't have hearts, really. They circulate they don't have like anything like a lung. Why would we choose this little thing that flies around, weird little eyes, and there's millions of them? Why would we do that? Yeah. Oh, they're easy to find, so they're attracted to fruit, so they're easy to find. That's good, right? Can we get that stool down? Like, what makes an organism something a scientist that you would want to study? Think about it for a second. Take a minute and think about it. You're a scientist, and you want to study how things are inherited. Why would you choose fruit flies? Why not humans? Say again. Cloud. Just because it is different, and you can compare and contrast. Is that what you're saying? Okay, that's fair. Could we close that door, please, somebody? Because the noise is going to bother me. Please shake off the morning grumpies. All right, so yes, that's a good point. But they are different, but they're also very similar. So we have to go under the assumption that all life on Earth is related. So we all do things very similarly. Or obviously different. I mean, a fruit fly is obviously very different from a human. But they have to do things very similarly, we assume, because we're related to them, because all life on Earth came from all other life. Does that make sense? In another way of saying it is that life started once, and then after life started, all life came after it. That's the theory. That's what we think is happening. And whether you're religious or not, you believe that, right? If you're religious, you believe a creator created all life on earth one time, right? And then during this first 7 days, correct? And then if you're not religious, then you're a scientist, you definitely think that all life started one time. There was you don't expect any normal person isn't going to expect to go to a mud puddle and find something crawling out of it that wasn't alive before, right? You don't expect. Do you know people used to think that? Did you know people used to think that? Do you know that people used to think that stone statues would come to life? Yeah. Like they would call them like all kinds of names, but different cultures called them different names. But they thought stone statues would come alive. Did you know that people used to think if you left rags in the corner of the barn, they would turn into mice? That they would turn into mice because they left rags, and then what happened the next few days? What happened? The rags will turn into mice, they thought, because they would find mice there. Huh. And did you know that people thought that when you died, you turned into flies? That's why they call the devil the Lord of the Flies, Lord of Death. Because flies come with death. If you die, things that die turn into flies. Why do they think that? Why would they think that when you die you turn to flies?
Because there's flies on dead.
Because every time there's something dead, there's flies. Every time you see rags, there's mice. Every time, when you see a human and then you see a statue, they look a lot alike. Why wouldn't that thing move? If this one moves, why doesn't that one move? So, I know it sounds silly to you, but back then, it was reasonable. It's not altogether unreasonable now. But it turns out that's not the way it works. We know it's not the way it works. How do we know? We did a series of, go ahead and say it. What did we do as humans to figure out that this is not the way the world works? We know today the world doesn't work that way. They're close. Research, tests, what do we call those things? Research and tests. Experiments, very good. One of the first experiments that kind of led us to this, do dead things come alive, right? A scientist I'm gonna take it. This is an aside. This is not in your case study, but I'm gonna bring it up over here. This is another case study that I have. It's the Redi experiment. An Italian named Redi he said, look, if it's true that these dead things come alive, then I'm gonna take this meat that's dead, this rotting meat, and I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna leave one open in a jar. And in another jar, because he needed a control group, right? We all know we need control groups. At this point, there should be no person in the room that doesn't know that we need a control group. Another jar, he said, I'm going to put a lid on it. It's going to be sealed. Oh, man. He said, I'm going to put a seal on it. It's going to be sealed. Let's see what happens. And then in the third lid, in the third sample, I'm going to have the meat again. And I'm going to, this time, instead of, in case there's something in the air you need air, I'm going to go ahead and put a screen over it. All right. That's what he did, and he left it out for a while. And what do you think happened? What do you think happened? Yeah, but what happened? What do you think the results were? The flies showed up where?
On the jar.
In the jar that was open. And the other two jars, no flies. Now, you might argue, well, maybe the meat needs air to turn into flies. But then that's why you had the group that had the screen. So this let air in, but didn't let anything else in. So the meat doesn't turn into flies. This was an experiment that taught that pretty much proved that spontaneous life from non-life was wrong. That just did not happen. We knew that because of this experiment and many others that were done that were similar to this. It just didn't make sense. This explanation of where life comes from doesn't make sense. Life does not come from death. To this day, we still believe that these thoughts still hang around in our heads. This is Halloween, so it's appropriate, the Halloween season, so it's appropriate for us to talk about the idea of zombies. Zombies, dead things coming back to life, vampires, etc. All come from those understandings that we used to think as a people, and most cultures used to think this because it makes sense just with simple observations, but it doesn't make sense with experiments, with testing it. If you test it, you see it's wrong. But if you don't test it, then you accept it as something that's normal, that dead things come back to life. It's possible. So make sure you bury it in a holy cemetery, 6 feet under, and make sure that you satisfy all the spirits so it doesn't raise up in the middle of the night and come and, stab you in the neck and suck your blood. But this kind of thought is not unreasonable until you start testing things and saying, oh, well, that doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So why choose fruit flies, though, when it comes to testing? Well, we wouldn't use humans because it would be, how legal, how ethical do you think it would be to start testing you? If I started saying, I wonder if it's true that skin repairs itself in a week. Come here for a second, let me cut you. How legal or ethical would that be? If I started experimenting on humans, you think it would be illegal? I agree. It would be illegal. You can't experiment on humans, not without some thinking. Eventually we have to do experiments on humans because no matter what different organisms we look like, humans are different. And so we have to make sure whatever we're doing works with humans as well. For instance, humans eat chocolate, right? Correct? Yeah. And in fact, some people, some research shows that chocolate's very good for us. But did you know chocolate kills dogs? So you can't at least it makes them sick. You can't give them chocolate, even though dogs are very similar to us in many other ways. Fruit flies can eat chocolate. They'll eat it all day long. But a dog can't. And so fruit flies and humans, we share something that dogs and humans don't. So when we talk about macadamia nuts, and there's a whole bunch of things that dogs really shouldn't be eating that we can and we should, and that's because we're different, even though we're both mammals, even though we've been living together for over 100,000 years. Dogs and humans have been living together for a very long time, culturally and in our same habitat. But still, we are different in many ways, so we have to be careful with our assumptions. But we use fruit flies because we can experiment on them. Without worrying about ethical or legal questions. Like, is anybody going to question the fact that we killed 1,000 fruit flies? I don't think so. It's not like you kill them for fun, but you're going to kill a lot of fruit flies when you do your experiments. Or if we force one group to mate with another group, is that going to be a problem for anybody? No, I don't think so. So another interesting thing about fruit flies is that by the way, we call these things model organisms. And what we mean by that is we study these biological processes in other organisms first, because there's stuff that kills all of us. For instance, if I make you drink bleach, what's going to happen? You're going to die. I mean, that's just common sense.
I mean, some people don't die.
Okay, most people would die, and it depends on how much. So, but let's just go ahead and assume that you did. All right, let me use another. Jesus. Okay, let's use another.
It was out in the open, and I thought it was a zoo. I just picked it up.
Wow. Okay. So let's use something more deadly. A bottle of cyanide would kill you. You did not. You would be dead. Cyanide is what we used to use to kill murderers in death row. It turns into a gas and it kills you, but it takes the place of oxygen and suffocates you. So, a gas chamber, yeah. In the old one of the gases used a long time ago, but now we use different things. I don't even know if the gas chamber still exists. It's just a horrible way of dying. You suffocate to death. So, in any case, that kills everybody. So it would kill a dog too, and a fruit fly. So there are things that kill everything, and there are things that help everything. Everything needs water, for instance. Plants, bacteria, we all need water. So there are things that are common, and so we can look at model organisms and test them and see if something's deadly. If it kills fruit flies, we're going to be a lot more careful before we give it to a human. Does that make sense? If it doesn't kill fruit flies, we'll test it on another organism to make sure, and then another organism. So we'll go from a fruit fly, maybe we'll test it on a mouse. Well, we're going to leave insects and go to a mammal, right? Maybe we'll test it on a mouse, and if it doesn't kill the mouse, then maybe we'll test it on a chimpanzee or a dog or a cat. If it doesn't kill them, then we could close the computer, listen to what I'm saying. You need to understand. You're not going to understand if you're not listening, if you're not engaging. So we test things, we test things closer and closer to human. Chimpanzees being the closest to human, we can keep moving up the ladder, and then finally we test it on humans. And why do we test it on humans? Because something that doesn't kill anything else might kill us. Something that nothing else reacts to, we might react to. We might have a bad reaction to it. It might be ew, poo-poo. Birds eat all kinds of little red berries that grow in bushes. So do bears. But if we eat some of those red berries, we're dead. They're deadly to us. It's because of how we process that food. We're different. We're not bears. We're not birds. We're human. So even though chimpanzees are very similar to us, we are not chimpanzees. And so if we eat, we have to make sure that just because it doesn't kill them, it could hurt us, so we have to be careful. So we test it on humans. At the last step is we test it on humans. Those are called human trials. That's how we test drugs. Is that clear? If you get a drug, it's already been tested on mice, on at least 2 other model organisms, and then we've tested it on humans. The vaccine for COVID, remember all the yelling and screaming that went on about COVID vaccine, was tested in mice, was tested in other organisms. Then they tested it on humans. And some doctors even volunteered their own children. And they test that after they tested it on adult humans, some doctors volunteered their children. Because just because it's safe for a human, an adult human, doesn't mean it's safe for a child. Does that make sense? So it's crazy, but it's also something that we understand it has to happen. If you want either that or we all die. So which would you rather have? Somebody volunteer or we all die? Okay, then that's your choice. That's not mine and that's not most people's, but that's it. So model organisms, we can experiment on them because they're not human. We do it ethically. We do always have to consider ethics. Nobody wants to torture anyone. The objective is not torture. Do animals suffer? Yes. Animals will suffer. However, most people think it's worth the sacrifice that the animal's making, suffering for, so that we can understand cancer, so that we can have, so you can have makeup. People think that's a silly reason to test on animals. Let's be very clear. If you put something that has not been tested on animals on your face, you could react to it. Does that make sense? You could go blind. You're putting a chemical on your face. It's not a joke. And everyone, girls and boys, like makeup. So we have to make sure that that stuff is safe. Did you know, for instance, that the first, again, talking about Halloween, did you know that the first, during the making of the first Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz? You never heard of the Wizard of Oz? Jesus, I have no words for that. Dorothy, the monkeys, the Wicked Witch of the West. Okay, oh, you haven't seen it. Okay, but you've heard of it. All right, so during the making of that movie, the Tin Man had silver makeup on. Do you know it made him sick? Almost killed him?
Yeah.
And makeup has killed other people, other models in the past. And you have to understand, in order to make makeup safe, we have to test it. It can't, and no, you can't just use a computer. A computer's not the solution. If you've used ChatGPT, you know the thing is okay, but it's not brilliant. It's just able to do things faster than we can. That's all. It can't think. So we have to be careful. So we do consider ethics, but when you consider ethics, it's about taking the good that you're going to do and you're going to compare it. You're going to compare it to the bad that we do. The bad is some animals are suffering. The good is a lot of animals, because animals will also benefit from this. I don't know if you've ever anybody here have pets? If you've ever bought food at the store, you know that it's all been tested. That food, it says at the bottom, tested by blah, blah, blah. And they make the food specially for the dog. How do we know what's good for the dog? We've tested it. We used to throw rice. We used to throw rice at weddings. You ever see that happen? People would throw rice or seeds. Seeds represent germination, the spring, the bringing forth of a new life. So fertility, right? So we used to throw rice at people when they were coming through, after they've been married, as they go into their car, because it was just a cute thing to do. You don't throw it at them, you just throw it in the air. Does that make sense? I can just see some of you whizzing it at somebody. But you throw it up in the air and it falls down on them and it's cute and everything's nice. The problem is that because of scientists experimenting, we know that now that birds died because of it. If the birds ate the rice, it swelled up in their insides and it killed them. So rice swelling up was a problem for them. So we don't do that anymore. So there's a lot of things that we can learn through experimentation, good and bad, and we have to consider both and ask ourselves, is it worth it? Is it worth the life of this cat or dog or fly or worm in order for us to get the good that comes out of it? So if you ever do a dissection, and you will probably do it in Miss B's class, or we have a cat in the back that we can dissect as well. Yes, it's a dead cat.
Where?
It's in a bag in the back.
It's in the now?
Yes, of course.
In the lab?
Yes, in the prep room. Yes, I don't mind you seeing it. It's not a freak show though. It's not a freak show. It's going to be used for dissection, for learning. Now that cat did not die for the lab. Why did that cat die?
Because the guy ran over.
No. No. That would be no good for dissection. An animal that's been run over is no good for dissection because it's going to be broken bones and nothing's going to be where it's supposed to be. So you need everything where it's supposed to be so you can do your learning. The good out of that is what? Shh. The good out of that is learning. That's what's good from dissection, from the death. We're making some good out of when we're doing dissection. We're learning about anatomy and about how when you open up the chest of a cat, or we did turtles one year, open up their chest and hold a lung and see a lung. Rats are very cool. Okay, all right, so rats are very good examples of, they have very similar anatomy to humans. Cats do too, and dogs. Why? Because we're all mammals. So because we're close in grouping, we share a lot of an anatomy. We all breathe with lungs, for instance. If you're looking for lungs, you're not going to find them in a regular fish, right? Because they don't have lungs. So you wouldn't choose a fish to look at lungs. So a good thing is learning. Well, the bad thing is something died, correct?
Yeah.
Now, the question I have for you is, why did that cat die?
Why did it die?
You tell me. You know the answer. Not for the experiment. It wasn't sick. Like it was.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, like was it sick? So y'all had to like kill it?
No, it wasn't sick. Probably wasn't sick.
Natural causes.
Not natural causes. They were killed. Thousands are killed every day.
Cancer.
Stop talking about that ridiculous thing about eating cats. That is an insult. It is an insult. It's an insult. Let me tell you something.
Why are you laughing?
Listen, laughing at that, as silly as that is, that people even believe it, if you're laughing at the fact that someone would believe that is a racially motivated joke. It's racist even at its core. Okay, you go ahead and laugh. When bad things happen, look, there's an old saying. There's an old saying. It comes from an older story from World War II. The story goes like this: They came for the Jews. Talking about the Nazis. They came for the Jews. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the Unionists. I didn't care. I wasn't a Unionist. They came for the Gypsies. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Gypsy. Then they came for me, and there was nobody left to say anything.
I'm sorry, but it's like they ate back, so it's like I can't eat.
Time we have left. But look, 5 minutes is perfect. You have consider your ethics, bad and good. This model organism, why did we pick fruit flies? Because they have babies. They have sex. Not all things that have babies have sex. There are things that reproduce without having sex. The asexual organisms, that's true. That's the word. But these organisms have sex. They make a lot of babies at one time. I should not put babies. That's bad. They're not babies. They're offspring. But most people call them, it's such a loose word nowadays, but they're offspring. A lot at one time. They have them often. We call this a short gestation. We have to wait only a little bit of time for them to be ready to have another set of babies. So if we were using you to experiment on, which by the way the Nazis did use humans to experiment on, if we were using you, we'd have to wait 9 months after you got pregnant to have a baby, and then we'd have to wait 18 years for that baby to get, or 14 or 12 years for that baby to get old enough to have babies. Does that make sense? So gestation time is short maturation time, how old how long it takes to grow up is short. They're cheap. They're cheap to keep. If you have a chimpanzee, you have to feed it a lot. You have to have a vet. You have to obviously there's a lot of poop and pee that you have to deal with. Dogs, the same thing. Cats. There's a lot of cost involved with those mammals. There's not a lot of cost with fruit flies. So they're cheap to keep. Of course, some of the bad things is they're real tiny. They're very small. But we have microscopes, so we can get around that. Their genetics are very interesting. But these are the reasons we use fruit flies. This is just one of the now the other one that's very similar to this is a mouse. You've heard of mouse or rats, right? And no, they're not the same. Rats are actually very good pets. Mice, on the other hand, they're cute, but they're very defensive. They bite a lot. So you really can't handle them. A rat doesn't bite as much. They're very social, and they don't bite as much. And they're very, very... I had 3 rats, pet rats, and we saved one, the white one. It was a neighbor who had let it loose. We saved it from the outdoors, and we took it to the vet, had it checked, put it in a cage. It was one of the nicest pets we ever had. It was the sweetest, cutest little low maintenance. It was amazing. Hamsters are mean. No, hamsters, No, it depends if they're scared or not. It's not, meanness in animals is usually because they're scared. Do you understand that? Animals attack when they're scared or they're trying to eat. They're trying to kill something to eat it. A hamster's not trying to kill you to eat you. So it's biting you because it's afraid. Rats won't bite you when they're afraid. They rarely bite because they're rarely afraid. They're very brave little creatures. They're litter box trained. You can train them to be in a litter box. So I'm not trying to sell you on a rat because we don't have rats anymore because they die every 4 years. Their lifespan is 4 years. By the way, lifespan, that's another one. Lifespan is short. So you can see a lot of generations in a short period of time. If we wanted to look at things being inherited in humans, we'd have to wait hundreds of years, right? To see generation after generation after generation. But we don't have to wait with fruit flies. So it's very similar with rats and mice. It's obviously a little longer than fruit flies, but these are why we choose mice and rats for. Now, why would we go from fruit flies to mice? Because mice have one added benefit, that they're mammals. Is it time to go? Yeah. All right. Let's get out of here then. Sorry we had that sidetrack, but I really feel strongly our society is going to head to real big trouble if we're not careful how we keep talking about each other.